We're coming to you live from the Middle Ford Tough Studio. Boomer Esiason, Greg Giannotti. It's Boomer and Gio on the Fan. Simulcast across the country on CBS Sports Network. And wherever you are in the free Odyssey app. Good Tuesday morning. A lot of NFL action, of course, after the show yesterday. We find out officially about Pete Carroll. There's a lot more Kevin Stefanski to the Giants talk. We're going to have a Darren Muji, Aaron Glenn press conference today. Joe Shane did talk to the media yesterday. So we will see these candidates and who they're going to talk to in the interview process, who the Giants are going to end up as their head coach that's going to pair up with Jackson Dart and hopefully do what the Bears and the Patriots have done here in the 2025 season. Knicks and Rangers in action last night. Wasn't so great for either one of them. Much worse for the Knicks than it was for the Rangers. We'll get to all of it. Good morning, Boomer. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, G. I don't know about that. We got to find out about how Igor Shesterkin's knee is doing. So that may not bode well for the New York Rangers last night. But we are now up to 6 fired NFL head coaches. Of course, Kevin Stefanski added to the list. Jonathan Gannon of the Arizona Cardinals. Raheem Morris, Brian Daboll, Pete Carroll, and, of course, Brian Callahan down with the Titans, who was fired midseason. So you have now 6 openings. We haven't heard what the Bucs are going to do. We haven't heard what the Dolphins are going to do yet. So I'm telling you, there's usually 7, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's another name that's going to be added to this list. And now you're seeing all the names come out of the possibilities of where guys can go. And, you know, where does a guy fit? So that's really the interesting thing. So Brian Flores seems to fit the Raiders. Does he not?
Now you say that because he is a very intense, stern, defensive man.
And they're going to get the first overall pick. And I'm just telling you, for whatever reason, I see a very tough, I see a kind of Raider-esque presence on the sideline. And it just feels to me like he would be the right guy. Now, whether or not Tom Brady is going to want him is because this is the other thing that now has come out, is that Tom Brady and his buddy Spytek are going to be the guys who are going to hire the new coach.
Yeah, I mean, it's and that's just out there and the things that Tom Brady likes, and he's still the number one. You've got 2 top analysts for the networks, you know, one in Troy Aikman being, you know, ESPN, Disney, ABC, obviously Tom Brady with Fox.
3.
And now, the top analysts, I said, for those 2 networks. And now a man who is sitting there on the NFL Today set, who sat next to you, who wants to not only remain there, but also run the Falcons, which he's going to do. Yeah.
No, not him, but it would be Matt Ryan, of course.
Well, Phil Simms wants Matt Ryan to shut up.
It's this generation of player. And, you know, well, Troy is not. Troy's before both Matt and Tom Brady. Matt and Tom Brady were together. But, yeah, these guys want to stay involved, and they've stayed close to these, franchises. Well, Matt, of course, very close to Arthur Blank. And then, of course, Tom Brady buying into the Raiders. So why wouldn't you use those guys if they are available? I understand about the dilemma, the ethical, you know, can they do both jobs at once while doing one or the other, and the inside information that they garner from their TV gig. Matt, not so much as Tom Brady and Troy Aikman, because those guys are out there and they are traveling around seeing teams. We didn't do much of that when we were at NFL Today, nor do they do much of that. I'm sure he still has contacts, and I'm sure he's still very close to the Atlanta Falcons. So I understand everybody's issue with it within the NFL. From where I sit, you know, Tom Brady was a part of this decision to hire Pete Carroll. You know what I'm saying? He was. So did he make the right decision? No. It's like anything else. It's like it's finding a needle in a haystack, finding the right guy, pairing him with the right quarterback, and then having, you know, a sense of structure and accountability from your head coach. And I think a lot of these teams are going to be looking for head coaches that have had head coaching experience. And that's why guys like Stefanski and guys like Brian Flores are going to be so popular.
Yeah, and Brian Flores had obviously ended poorly and sort of out of nowhere at the time, and he hasn't had an opportunity to get another head coaching job. You know about the lawsuit that is out there. Done a great job in Minnesota as a defensive coordinator. He has certainly earned the opportunity to be able to be a head coach again. I always thought that if Flores was going to get a job, that Josh McCown, who was the quarterback's coach there, that everybody absolutely loves, and the Houston Texans almost hired him as their head coach before he got an assistant job, would go along with Brian Flores because they're on the same staff there in Minnesota and be his offensive coordinator. I also think you need to because much like Brian Daboll, Brian Flores, type A, in your face, no nonsense. This is the way it's got to go. And like the Brian Daboll, Wink Martindale thing didn't work because Wink was also one of those guys. And he wasn't going to listen to Brian Daboll. He'd listen to a John Harbaugh. He'd listen to guys like that who had done it before, maybe won a Super Bowl, but wasn't going to hear it from Brian Daboll. So you got to be careful with who you pair there. And as far as the head coaches that have the other head coach that's got head coaching experience, I'm at the point as the day went on yesterday that I really, really want the Giants to hire Kevin Stefanski. I mean, I just think it's absolutely perfect. And one of these teams finally caught a break when it came from who was available when they fired a coach.
I was thinking when he did come available, would the Jets reconsider their thought about Aaron Glenn?
Yeah, but if I'm Kevin Stefanski, I'm not going to the Jets.
No, I know.
This is the
exactly.
part of it, though. So, you're not. And Todd McShay said it yesterday, too. So there's not a single player in the draft that wants to be a New York Jet. Now, that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but when it comes to the head coaches, I keep saying this, that Aaron Glenn was the only guy who would rather coach the Jets than anybody else. I firmly believe that anybody else out there that was a candidate that had offers from two different teams, and the Jets were one of them, they were taking the other team. Yeah. So that's another reason why Aaron Glenn has to stay here. But if I'm Kevin Stefanski and I'm the New York Giants, I make sure that this thing happens, and I think that Jackson Dart would be an amazing. We just think the Browns are always terrible. And they have been.
Just watching their owner yesterday talk.
Yeah, it's a disaster. And but the fact that this guy was able to do what he did, have 3 playoff games while he was there, win one of them, 2 Coach of the Years. I mean, just the fact that all the quarterbacks that he had to go through, and I know that he probably had some input on some of it. But he basically, Jimmy Haslam.
I think he lost out on some of that input.
Yeah, and Jimmy Haslam, too. I don't know if he was just taking all the slings and arrows yesterday or really was true. Made it seem like he was the only driving force behind the Deshaun Watson thing. He made it sound like that. But Stefanski, to me, is just it's the perfect guy at the right time for this organization. We always yell and scream about guys with a head coaching experience. He's been through the blender of the NFL in one of the worst organizations in sports. If he comes here with Jackson Dart, I mean, that's exactly the guy that we're talking about. When we said who is the Vrabel of this class,
you would think it would be Kevin Stefanski.
That's the closest thing that we have to it. Now, Kevin Stefanski wasn't a player, didn't win championships with the Giants like Vrabel did with the Patriots, but that's the closest thing that we have. And we don't have the Ben Johnson comp. We don't have that this year.
I wonder if Kevin Stefanski and Jonathan Gannon, I'm sure they know each other. I don't know if they've ever worked together before. But if you had Kevin Stefanski here as your head coach and Jonathan Gannon as your defensive coordinator.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be great. And obviously.
Because Jonathan was really good in Philadelphia. And he was replaced by Vic Fangio. I think it was Vic Fangio who replaced him in Philadelphia after he left to go to Arizona.
Yeah.
I think it was him. I don't know if there was somebody in between him leaving and Vic Fangio taking over, because remember Howie Roseman brought in both Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore.
Yeah, I think there was somebody in between, because remember, so they have that great year and they lose the Super Bowl, then they lose both their coordinators, then they came back and had a crappy year, and then Sirianni was on the hot seat, and then they fired the coordinators, brought in Moore and Fangio, and then went on. So who were the people in between? I don't remember. But remember, it was what, Steichen and Gannon left at the same time, right?
Yeah, it's amazing when I watch these owners sit up there with the GMs who end up staying, but the coach ends up going.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the coach has just got to be like, look at these 2 idiots.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
I mean, they'll never say that.
But, I mean, there's a lot of that goes on. I mean, you pointed out yesterday that, we always make the comparison with the Bears and the Patriots, and that's what the Giant fans should be doing with their own organization. In both those places, they kept their GMs.
Yeah, the other thing, too, is that, I told you the Bengals were not firing Zach Taylor.
Right, yep.
And they're running it back. And, Mike Brown, the owner out there, and Katie Blackburn, his daughter, do not get pressured into by fans. They just don't. That's all they own. They only own the football team. They've done it this way for their entire – it's kind of like what the Steelers do. They just do not bow to fan pressure, no matter what that fan pressure is, no matter whether it's 75% of the fans that want the coach fired or the GM fired. They have the smallest front office staff in the NFL. I've always told you that. And unfortunately for them, the biggest problem is keeping Joe Burrow on the field. When he's on the field, they're a really good team. When he's off the field, they don't really have a backup to speak of. And maybe they'll re-sign Joe Flacco as their backup, and he hangs there another couple years and, maybe has to play 3 or 4 games a year for them. But, they were not going to move off of. That's just not who they are. They're more Steeler-esque than anything.
Yeah, I mean, when that offense is rolling and they're healthy, they're one of the best offenses to watch. And Zach Taylor, of course, has to be a part of that. It can't just be Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase who get the credit. I mean, the head coach who's calling the plays has a lot to do with that as well. So
now, Kevin Stefanski, 45-56 in 6 seasons as the Browns head coach. 8-26 in the last 2 years, 37-30 in the first 4 seasons with the Browns. And that's essentially with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
Right? So he led the team to the first playoff win in 1994.
Whoa.
Since 1994. In 2020, that was the first year he was with the team.
And he had COVID. He wasn't even on the sideline when they won.
Second head coach in Browns history with multiple seasons with 11 or more wins. The only other coach that did that in Browns history is the guy that they named the team after, Paul Brown.
Yeah.
Longest tenured Browns head coach, 6 seasons since Dan Rutigliano. I was old enough to actually play in a game against Dan Rutigliano back in 1984. They were eliminated from playoff contention following a Week 14 loss to Tennessee. 5-12 this season, despite allowing only 277 yards per game, second fewest in the NFL. I mean, he's got 3 playoff appearances since returning to the NFL in 1999. Let me see, 2 playoff appearances under head coach Kevin Stefanski out of those 3.
Yeah, I mean, and he is, of course, was working for horrible ownership out there, found a way to have some success. Now, the question is, if you're Kevin Stefanski and you look at the openings and assuming most teams are going to want to talk to him, let's just assume for a minute that
there are a number of teams that are reportedly already reached out to set up interviews.
So if you're Kevin Stefanski, you're looking at all the situations, and this is why we both were talking about how attractive this Giant job is going to be. I mean, I look at the job openings, and unless he is opposed to being in New York or doesn't like it here or thinks that the media is going to crush him or something and would rather be in a place like Nashville, the Giants job's the best job. It just is. And I think Joe Shane's made a lot of mistakes, but one thing is true. They do have a lot of potential with what is there right now and some of the cap space, some of the picks that they have, all of those things. We forget how many injuries they had on that offense, guys that they'll be getting back next year. The defense, of course, has been overrated, and we'll see what that looks like. But still, I mean, there is a foundation, not as strong as I think the Giants think there is, but that's the best job available.
You got to remember, so Kevin Stefanski grew up in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And he went to the University of Pennsylvania. So, he's a Northeast guy.
Yeah.
He knows what's going on here. He knows what, the fans are like around here. He was obviously, I'm assuming he was a Philadelphia Eagle fan growing up.
Yeah, right. But he may be like, hey, he spent most of his entire coaching career before going to Cleveland and Minnesota. So he might be like, wow, I'd rather be in a market where they cheer me as opposed to want me on a spit every 2 seconds. I'm not sure.
But when he was with the Vikings, did you like him?
Oh, I loved him. I wanted him to be the head coach. I didn't want him to go. I mean, I was hoping at some point before Kevin O'Connell came that if he ended up, losing his job with the Browns, and maybe he would come back because I liked him that much. But yeah, I love the guy. And really thought he was going to have a lot of success wherever he went. And, unfortunately, it's the Browns. But so I'm just the reason I don't think that he's going to be adverse to coming to New York because of those reasons. I'm just trying to find, what would be the reason that he would turn the Giants job down? I couldn't tell you over these other jobs. I don't know what that would be.
It all comes down maybe to contract length and the amount of money he would be paid. That could be, you just never know. But you see the teams. Cardinals, Raiders, Browns, Falcons, Giants, Titans.
I mean,
it's always the same teams, it feels like.
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, these are bad football teams.
They cannot get out of their own ways.
I mean, you want to tell me that maybe Atlanta could be a little bit attractive for someone like Stefanski, but their quarterback situation, Penix. If I'm looking at the Penix and Dart, I'm going Jackson Dart 10 times out of 10. With the injury history there, I know that everybody's worried about Jackson Dart being hurt all the time. With the injury history with Penix, I mean, I would take that Giants job. And I've been down on the Giants forever, but out of those teams and those franchises and all of that,
the Falcons do have some really top end players, though. There's no question about that. And they were 8-9, so they have the best record of the teams that fired their head coaches. Their quarterback situation is a little bit fluid. I would think that Michael Penix will be back at some point early next year, and the question is whether or not they decide to keep Kirk Cousins. Now, I don't think his contract is guaranteed for the upcoming season, but there is some decision-making that they have to make here in the offseason as to whether or not they keep him.
Well, another thing that I always worry about when you've got a general manager that's staying and a head coach that's going is, will Joe Schoen be willing to give a full endorsement to a guy who's been a head coach before as opposed to someone who's, Joe Schoen's hiring a coordinator saying, you're my guy, I believed in you, that type of thing. I'm going to hitch my wagons to this guy so I have control in the building, as opposed to the guy that's going to come in here and say, well, these are the things that I want to do because I've done it before. So that's just something that I really hope Joe Schoen doesn't push for someone that he feels like he's going to be the alpha in the building as opposed to someone who's done it before.
Yeah, it's interesting. Looking at some of the contracts yesterday for some of the guys that are out there, like Kyler Murray. So he signed a $230.5 million contract in 2022. So if the Cardinals decide to move on from Kyler Murray, if they cut him, it'd be a $52 million cap charge. If they trade him, it's a $16 million cap charge to the Cardinals. And the cap savings for the Cardinals, if they cut him, would only be $1 million. If they trade him, it would be $37 million. Now, his base salary next year, $22.8 million. In 2027, $19.5 million. And in 2028, $34 million. And there is a club option for that 2028. So he could be a free agent in it could be a 2-year window where he could come and play quarterback for you if you wanted to trade for him. So, meaning that the Jets, that could be a guy that they could target if they don't get the right guy in the draft, or maybe Dante Moore decides to go back to Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, it would be you could do worse, you could do better.
I could see that. I mean, at least you'd have some excitement,
I suppose.
And I would also think that a guy, whether it be Kyler Murray or whatever guy they bring in that's going to be the eventual stopgap here, would be excited about coming and being, able to start and, at least be out there with a reasonably good offensive line. Garrett Wilson, one of the top wide receivers in the NFL, a top end running back, 2 running backs for that matter. And I would think that, the tight end situation is not bad for the Jets. I think it's a plug and play situation for a guy like Kyler Murray. They got to fix the defense, the Jets.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's every aspect of that roster outside of the offensive line, which was stayed intact.
Yeah, but I can look at the line and I could say, okay, we can run the ball. We can actually throw the ball down the field with Garrett Wilson. They can pick up another wide receiver. They did trade for 2 wide receivers that are going to make the team most likely. Mechie 3 and Adonai Mitchell. I think they're both going to make the team next year. They're quality professional football players. And maybe they draft another high-end wide receiver to have 2 and then add one of these, middling kind of quarterbacks like a Kyler Murray. You might have something there.
Well, I mean, it'll be better than what they have now. And what are you doing with Breece Hall would be the other big question.
No, you're going to sign him to a contract. I would think.
You think?
I would think.
They could franchise him, too.
Yeah. I mean, it could try to do exactly what the Giants did with Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, it didn't work out great for them in the end.
Initially it didn't, but at the end, they ended up losing him and only got a compensatory pick, I believe, back.
All right, Boomer and Gio just getting started on this Tuesday morning. Jerry Recco's got some NFL and obviously some other stuff with the Knicks and Rangers last night. Boomer's got something for you. Quick break. We'll be right back right after this.